Morning. We will see how far I make it today. It's been a week, and I am very glad this is a review lesson, because if I had to do new material, I'm not sure how far I would make it. All right, we are going to start off with a word of prayer, because that's the only way I'm going to make it through this lesson. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come forward and present a review lesson, Lord. It's an important lesson because it shows your overall plan, what you created, and how you knew what was going to happen, and how you already had a plan in place. Lord, I ask that you please be with me so that everybody here understands your plan, sees your plan, and they don't see me, and they don't see my shortfalls, Lord. We ask that you be with each and every one of us today. In your name we pray. Amen. So, today is a review lesson. So, we're going to try something a little different here. We start with the seven C's. That was the very first lesson, if I remember correctly. Sorry, somebody's car in the sun is just right in my eyeballs. I'm sure you do. So we start with the seven C's. Can anybody tell me what they are? Give me the first C. That's easy. Second one. Hey, good job. Third one. Catastrophe. Let's go for number 4. Confusion. Awesome. Good job. 5. Christ. There you go. 6. Died on a cross. Good. Crucifixion will work too. And the very last one. Consummation. I had to spell it 3 or 4 times before I got it right. So what we learned about in these first 10 lessons, we did a lot of creation. And then we ended kind of on corruption. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go through, we're going to do a recap on this, and we're going to try and not use Genesis to define creation, because we can find it in other places in the Bible. So it's kind of like when you define a word for somebody, you're not supposed to use the word to define the word, or at least that's what I was always taught until I went on the web and looked at Webster's dictionary, and they're using the word to define the word, and I'm like, well, that really doesn't tell me anything, that does it? So, in creation, we learned that God created the heavens and the earth. We learned it in Genesis. Where else did we learn this? Let's take a look at Nehemiah 9:6. Give you guys a minute to get there. Nehemiah 9:6. You are the Lord, you alone. You have made the heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. And you preserve all of them, and the host of heavens worship you. So here in Nehemiah, we have the beginning part of Genesis kind of summed up. The Lord, and only him alone, made the heavens, the earth, the hosts, the animals, the seas, everything that's in it, and they preserve all of them. It even goes on to say he made the hosts of heaven, and they worship you. So he made the angels. Here in Nehemiah, we have reaffirmation that indeed, God did create the heavens and the earth. We see that. And if we think about it, he said, you alone. So here we also see his great power. For if he created all this stuff, he created it from nothing. I mean, Jeff likes to work on knives. He likes to create knives and make things, but I don't think Jeff is going to do like this and have a knife appear in his hand. If he did, we'd have some serious questions on how he learned that magic trick, especially without getting cut. So it's power that we don't know. It's power that we have far beyond, at least my comprehension. He created it all. And as we go through and we continue on, we learn some more important things. We learned about how he created and what he created. He created days. We learned about that. And created kinds. And it's really important here that we need to understand this. Let's move to Exodus 20:11. In Nehemiah, we heard that God had created the heavens, the earth, and a really generalized summary of creation. When we go to Exodus 20:11, we see a little detail added. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and that is all that is in them. And on the seventh day he rested. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So in Nehemiah, he says, the Lord made all this stuff, and he made it wonderful. Exodus, it says, oh, and by the way, he did it in 6 days. And it's really important here because we learn a word that is used in Genesis, but it's also used in Exodus, the word yom. It's a Hebrew word. I touched on this earlier. It's the Hebrew word for the literal day. Every time it is used, it means a 24-hour period. And here in Exodus, for in the first 6 days, 24-hour period, we take that, we go back to Genesis, and what does it say in Genesis? And on the third day, or on the fourth day, or on the second day, he said it was good. It's the same use of the word day. So we here have Exodus, again, reaffirming our Genesis story. And it's important to understand because it's all part of God's plan. We hear so many times when my wife likes rocks. We were up at Lake Superior and we were picking up these rocks, and sometimes they have sedimentary rocks that have shellfish, fossil type stuff on them, and other places, if you've ever seen the Petoskey stone, you think about that. You think of other stones, and everybody goes, oh yeah, that was in the Preozoic million years ago era. Well, hold up here a second, guys. If that was in the Prehistoric Mesozoic era, or whatever millions of years ago, that thing died before it can be like a rock. And their view is that all happened before man ever, quote, evolved. So we have a problem here. We have death before man. As we're going to see in a minute, actually a few minutes, that's not quite right. No, it's not. So when people say, oh, Genesis is an account of day, just another term for millions of years. Well, a million years may seem like a day to God, but it's not. In Genesis, it was wrote as a day. And there's this old joke that goes around. This guy's asking God, they say that, for you, a million years is but a minute. And God says, it can seem like that, yes. And for you, $1 million is just like a few cents. God's like, well, I have all the riches. The guy says, can you loan me $1? God says, just a minute. That's not how Genesis was wrote. Genesis was wrote, a day is a day. So we can take that to mean exactly what it says. So we move on to another part of creation, the animals and man. And here we learn another important part of creation, that everything was made according to its kind. So let's take a look at Leviticus 11, 13 through 19. It's a little longer passage, but I want to make sure we understand the use of the word kind. There's a cloud there now, but no, leave it. I've moved. But it's your driver's window in your truck that's reflecting back up at me. It's got to be annoying to you, Jeff. It really does. So Leviticus 13 through 19. We see the word kind used in reference here. We see it in birds and things. Birds, when he goes and he talks about this. And these you shall detest among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are detestable. The eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon of any kind. Every raven of any kind. The ostrich, the nighthawk, my favorite, the seagull. The hawk of any kind. The little owl, the cormorant, I didn't try to pronounce that one right. Yeah, that one. The short-eared owl, the barn owl, the tawny owl, the carriole vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hope, and the bat. So here in Leviticus, we are seeing the use of the word kind. Again, reaffirming what we read in Genesis. Things were created according to kinds. And this becomes important because we kind of use it to refute evolution. There has yet to be a new animal that has evolved into a new kind. We see a lot of, take the dog, for example. They take a golden retriever and a poodle and come up with something else, but it's still a dog. All they've done is change its attitude and give it a perm, but it's still a dog. We take cats in some instances, or up in the horse, where they make another horse that can't, I forget what the donkey or an ass or a mule, one of them, that's it. And mule? Thank you. Somebody knew better than I would. I don't remember that. And that's it for the mule. You ain't going any further. But they didn't take the horse and the donkey and make an ostrich or make a cat. They're different kinds. That's never happened. We don't ever see that. And there's lots of changes in each kind, as we said. But we still haven't crossed the kind at all. It also shows that we didn't evolve from apes, because they're a different kind. All animals he created included the livestock according to the kind. And so as we look at this and we think about all the kinds, currently we have a lot of variation in what we have. There's a lot of different things that we've done. The example I gave of the golden doodle. I mean, the golden doodle is never on the ark, thankfully. Probably the golden retriever wasn't either. It was a kind. And God had created even if we just looked at the kinds, God created this all at once. All the birds and animals, including insects, said they're there. In one day, he created a kind. We see his amazing power. We see what he is capable of doing. And he also created the plants, and he made all of them. But when he came to man, that was different. Think, he made all the animals and all the livestock, and he said, boom, there it is. Here's your plants. I don't even want to go on how many kinds of different plants there are. It's green, it's a plant. Unless it's a tree and it's hard. Other than that, it's a plant. That's my definition of my vocabulary on plants. There's thousands more of them. Same thing with the sea creatures. There's lots of them. But when he comes to man, we will make man in our image. One, he spends more time on us. If you think about it. He spent, I'm going to say a day, that's what Genesis says, creating winged things and animals, or a day creating plant life, and then he creates man. So you have a multitude of things that he created at once, and then he focuses on man. And he makes man in his image. So we are made in the image of God. And he made us special in multiple ways. One, in his image. Two, we're to have dominion over everything, and we're to be the caretakers of his creation. So he created this great big world, all the plants, the animals, and as we learn, even behemoth, dragons, large creatures, and he said, you're to have dominion over them. I want you to be responsible for managing what I created. Okay. So he's entrusted us with our care. They're supposed to be a good steward of what he was created, of what God had created, not what we had created. Unfortunately, this is kind of where some people veer off. The word here is stewardship. And unfortunately, stewardship also gets a little too much into environmentalism. Sorry, that's the word I'm looking for. I want to take care of this, so we have to save the planet in order to be good stewards of it. People take environmentalism, environmental causes, and unfortunately, they put more focus on the cause than the harm they're creating. We are going to save pick a bird, at the expense of people. At the expense of everything else, we're going to save this one bird. That is not what was intended. We're to be caretakers of it. And we also need to be stewards of the earth, but more importantly, we need to be stewards of each other, caretakers of each other. This is where what Jeff is doing with the men's breakfast and the accountability system, so that we are caretakers of not only what God created, but also of each other. And the interesting thing about evolution and the environmentalism is there are birds that they have listed as extinct. What happens about 20 years later? Oh, look, we found one in Indonesia. It was extinct. It has re-evolved. Kid you not? Headline article, don't ask me why it popped up on my computer screen last week. This bird re-evolved into existence. Okay. You say so. The bird was never extinct anyway. The bird had just gone off and hidden away from people because, well, he probably had enough of people too, and said, I'm going to go someplace else. But we were to be good stewards. We are not supposed to focus on the environment and the animals or the plants at the expense of other people. We need to be focusing on the people. And that's where the environmentalists have gone astray. Now, that's not saying we need to go strip mine everywhere and, destroy the beauty God has created. No. I own 40 acres for a reason because I want to keep what he has created. I happen to like living in the woods. But I'm not going to let it get overmanaged and all the sin and everything that comes with overrunning plant weeds and everything else, destroy it. It's called caretaking it. But if there are trees or there are plants or there are things in the path that my kids are going to get hurt on, they're coming out. Because we were given dominion over it. We were more important than the plants and the trees. God created us special. And I touched on it again, but I'll touch on it again here. When we go back and look at the environmentalists, and they say things were dead before man, we can't have that. And in Job, we do in fact learn that dinosaurs and dragons, that's an actual word, were here before man. So let's talk about man and let's talk about woman that God created to oversee this creation. We can learn a few things from other parts of the Bible. So let's go to 1 Timothy 2, 13 through 14. First Timothy 2, 13 through 14. For a man ought not cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But a woman is the glory of man. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. So here in Timothy, we have reaffirmation of what we learn in Genesis. That man and woman did not evolve from anything, but woman was indeed created from man. And we go back to Genesis and we find the details on that and how that was done. We also learn in 1 Corinthians 11, 7 through 8, First Corinthians 11, 7 through 8. For a man ought not cover his head, since he is in the glory of God. Did I copy? Same thing. Ha! I messed up my two verses. Let's do this again. 1 Timothy 2, 13 and 14. Go back to there. Nope, you guys weren't wrong. I told you to go to 1 Timothy, and I read 1 Corinthians. We'll get to both of them. Don't worry about it. This is why I wrote this down, because Nope. Jeff would have a few things to say about that. Let's go to 1 Timothy 2, 13 and 14. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived. But the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. And I put this one in first because in Genesis 3, this is what happens first. Woman was the one who was deceived by Satan. Look at this. It's nice. It's shiny. It's pretty. Yes, we know. Diamonds are a woman's best friend. Shiny, pretty. It won't hurt you. Come take it. Oh, don't pay attention to what he said. That's not exactly what he said. He only said this, which what Satan was telling was half a truth, not the whole truth. It was interesting because when Eve went to correct him, she didn't get it quite right either. She added a few things to it. So, Eve was deceived. Mhm. Yes. Oh, very much so different. Very different. And he did because Adam named all the animals and the helper was not found. It says that. So I have no idea how long it took Adam to name things, but it would take me a lot longer than Adam did because there's no way I'd get to about the fifth thing and go, have I called that yet? I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm so far removed from Adam and have deficient genes and stuff like that I don't have enough memory. I'll leave it to old age. So let's go to Corinthians now. So we also learn in 1 Corinthians 11, 7 and 8. For a man ought not cover his head, since he is the image and the glory of God. But a woman is the glory of man. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. And this goes back to the point that we had raised earlier, that Adam indeed named all the land animals, and a helper was not found. I mean, sure, he had some animals that probably were pretty nice. I don't know if they had a domesticated dog back then. It'd be really cool to have a dog, but it's not a helper. It's not somebody that is part of him. It's not somebody who will complete him, as we will find out a little later. So God took man, put him in a sleep, removed a rib, and woman is made. And a partner is made for man. And here we see the beginnings of more of God's plan being laid out. We see the beginnings of marriage. We see the beginnings of a man and a woman coming together. Let's take a look at Mark 10, 6 through 9. I won't mess this up because it's on the bottom of my page. Mark 10, 6 through 9. And it starts out really nice. I like the way it starts out. But from the beginning of creation. So from the time God started all of this, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. And here we find the principles for marriage. We find the principles for how we are to live out the rest of our life. We find a lot in this passage that goes back to Genesis, and a lot that is applicable today. God made them male and female. He did not make them half one way, half the other. He did not make them whatever the latest craze is today. It boggles my mind. He made them male and female. One male and one female. And here it also tells us that a man shall leave his father and his mother. And here we see the representation of the family. So he made them male and female. He told them to be fruitful and multiply. So we have a family. And when the man has left his father and mother, he goes out and he holds fast to his wife. And the two shall become one. So here we have the prescription for marriage. We have it from, you could say, from a little boy's birth, being raised in a godly home. When he leaves, goes and finds his wife, the two shall become one, and they start over, to be fruitful and multiply. It is a prescription for marriage that is found and goes all the way back to Genesis. Sorry. Back to Genesis, where God created this. This was part of his plan. This is what he wanted to have happen. And so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined, let no man separate. In the marriage, when Lisa and I got married, there is a little clause in there that I'm surprised she hasn't fulfilled yet. Till death do us part. And I'm sure she's probably considered it a few times knowing me. Like I always said, I'm at 26 years. I'm not dead yet. Yet. Well, which one? Thou shalt not kill? That's probably the only reason I'm alive. So God has ordained marriage. He's ordained the family. He has ordained us going through life. And man was not to separate it. So we learn more about God's plan here. We learn more about what he had envisioned for us. And we haven't read in Genesis yet. We've used the rest of the Bible to apply and prove and show Genesis. Unfortunately, what God took 7 days to create, made wonderful, laid out this glorious earth. I'm sure it had to be more glorious than it is today. There was no sin and death in it. Man, I want you to take care of this. I even made you a helper. It's woman over here. Tend my garden. What happens in chapter 3, verse 1? Yeah, we hit our second C. Corruption. Chapter 3, we start to see this going downhill. Now, I say downhill, but God knew it was going to go on. He already had, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to take care of it. But in chapter 3, we start to see corruption. We don't even make it past the first verse, and Satan's already coming in. Let's go to Hebrews 9:22. Since I don't have that typed out, I'm actually going to look it up with you guys. Good, I found Hebrews quickly. Hebrews 9:22. Yep, this is the one I want. According to the law, almost all things are purified with blood, And without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. This is an important verse for chapter 3. Because chapter 3 is where sin comes into the world. Chapter 3 is where Satan deceives Eve. She eats that apple. And then what does she do? Hey, man, it's good. Take a bite. So what does Adam do? Sure, dear. And they sin. They've been deceived. They have disobeyed God. Now, in my book, some say it was a week, maybe a month. It wasn't long. I mean, if we can think the maximum it could have been would have been 9 months, because Cain hadn't been born yet, or is it Abel? Which one's first, Jeff? Cain or Abel? Abel? Thanks. Abel. So we know it's been less than 9 months, and they've messed up, and they've been tossed out of Eden. But before that, the serpent deceives him. Adam and Eve eat of the apple, and then the next day, God comes walking through the garden and says, hey, where are you guys? I want to talk with you today. Oh, we're hiding. Why? We're naked. Who told you you're naked? God knows what's going on. Yeah, I mean, he ain't dumb. I mean, as I said in this lesson, it's like, when your kids screw up and you're like, yeah, we know what happened. Wasn't me. Really? Yeah, I don't have chocolate on my face. Okay. God knew what had happened. And we also learn the inadequacies of how we try to cover it up. They tried to take plants, fig leaves, and cover up their nakedness because they were ashamed. Now, I'm thinking about that this morning and yesterday. I've got this fig leaf. Now, if I take a leaf off a plant, it's going to last 2 days, maybe, if that. It's going to wither, fall, and I'm going to go off and do it again. It's not enough to cover at all. So we try to cover up our own sin. We try to fix what we've broken, and we can't. It's not going to happen. So the Lord says, who told you you're naked? Well, now we hit our second problem. They start blaming. Adam, you're head of the household. What happened? She did it. Eve, it was the serpent. We see the blame game, trying to get out of our sin. The point being, we can't fix it. We can't fix the sin problem that we have. And in Hebrews 9:22, we learn that without the shedding of blood, there's no remissions of sin. So if we go back to Genesis, how does this relate? This relates because God had to kill an animal. He had to shed the blood of an animal to make clothes, to cover Adam and Eve. Only God can provide that atonement that we can't. We are not going to earn our way anywhere. We're not going to be good enough to get anywhere. An only way is through Jesus Christ. And we see kind of a metaphor of that and what was to happen when God made clothes, the shedding of the blood of the animal to cover the sins of the humans and what we had done. So Genesis is a story of God's plan. Have you ever built, or seen the video or something, built this great, massive structure? I'll take a deck of cards, for example. Build a nice tower. Elijah was trying to do that this week. He couldn't get past the first layer on a granite countertop. I'm like, yeah, not going to happen. It's a little too slick. Try to put a towel down. So he puts the towel down, and he finally gets 4 cards in the first layer. And I go, boom, flattened him. He's like, can't have air movement. If you have air movement, this isn't going to work either. So he starts rebuilding it again. And he's taking pride in what he's doing because he's finally, trying to get this done. And I'd say he got probably to the second story before he could continue. They continually fell and continually fell. But have you ever watched one of those things where you finally get done, you've made this creation, and one thing happens, and it all breaks? I mean, I think of it, I like thinking cars and stuff like that. I got this nice truck, the whole 9 yards, right there, cleaned it all out, shut the door, and poof, the body panels fall off of it. God created the earth, the animals, the heavens, the stars, the plants, even my lovely seagull. And what did man do? Shut the door and the fenders fell off. Screwed it all up. We're never going to be able to fix that. We need Jesus Christ in order to do that, and his blood that was shed on the cross. And we can see that as we look at Genesis and look at the story of how God created everything, put it all into place, and then we messed it up. But God had a plan, and that plan was salvation through Jesus Christ. So we need to believe on him because he is the only way we're going to get the fenders back on that car. We're not going to get it on any other way. Questions? Comments? I'm running long again. Deception goes all the way back. Sin goes all the way back to the beginning. And the only way we're going to be able to combat sin is with the help of Jesus Christ. Otherwise, we will wake up every morning, turn on the coffee pot, trip over something, and get angry. And it's downhill from there. Mike, would you please close this in prayer?